Welcome to Living Well with Mary Lou Andre, a 30-minute lifestyle program to help you live better on your own terms by being inspired by interesting and thought-provoking people who make the world a better place to live. I'm your host, Mary Lou Andre, and today I'm excited to introduce you to my friend, historical fiction author, and Needham High School graduate, Janis Robinson Daly. When she became an empty nester, Janis decided the time was right to tackle a project that had been calling her for many years, researching her family tree. Inspired by the discovery that her great-grandfather founded the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania in 1850, Janis put pen to paper and wrote her first novel, The Unlocked Path, in 2022. This inaugural book celebrates pioneering women doctors at the turn of the 20th century. Its sequel, The Path Beneath Her Feet, published in 2024, honors the work of the American women's hospitals in rural America during the 1930s. As if being a first-time author at age 60 was not enough, Janis is now a sought-after genealogy speaker sharing her love of research to inspire others to start their own writing journeys. She has spoken at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, the National Women's History Alliance, and the National First Ladies Librarium and Museum. And today, she speaks to us. Janis, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mary Lou. What a pleasure to be back in Needham again.
I know, we have so much to cover in 30 minutes. So I thought what we'd do is just to break your life down a little bit, because you certainly have had an interesting journey. But let's start out when your name is Janis Robinson Daly, but let's start out when you were Janis Robinson, growing up in the mean streets of Needham. Where did you go to school? What were some of your memories being a young person in Needham? And we'll go from there.
Sure, always happy memories, and I love crossing over the Charles River, coming down 135. I did have to drive through my old neighborhood today. Looks a little bit different. But yes, grew up, spent my entire childhood in Needham, graduated from Needham High, yes, I'll admit, 1980, and lots of fond memories. Had the wonderful experience of my street bordering fabulous places for kids and teens to discover. One side of us, we had the reservoir where we would skate after shoveling it ourselves in the winter, walking across it to go to Pollard Junior High School at that time. Had gone to Stephen Palmer before it closed. And that was some interesting times for sure. Stephen Palmer was so old, the furnace would go out and we'd have to walk across and use classrooms at St. Joseph's.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine doing that today? So reservoir on one side for skating, backed up to the Needham Golf Course for sledding in the winters, for running through sand traps in the summer and the sprinklers. And then on the other side, when we hit the teenage years, we had the Charles River and the call of hanging out at the Big Rock. So lots of
I had
great.
a couple boys that visited that Big Rock.
Yes.
So some things change and some things never do.
Yeah.
So then you went to college. You went to Wheaton, I believe.
Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts.
Yeah, and we'll get into a little bit how that influenced your journey as a writer for women's historical fiction. I think that's really interesting. But then take us through your professional years, because that's where you and I met. You and I worked together at the Boston Children's Museum in marketing and PR, and I'm always telling people that come to me for advice, I'm like, learn how to connect with people, learn how to write, and you can do anything. But you were part of my journey as a professional. We worked, I think that was my second job out of college. So walk us through your first professional life, and then we'll get into your third chapter.
Absolutely. So started out in advertising and marketing, graduated from Wheaton, and went right to work the next week at one of the Boston ad agencies.
Okay.
Was very fortunate to have landed at one of the top ones at the time. Bounced around a little bit for a few years, different agencies, learning a lot. until I got burnt out on agency life and working till 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and headed to corporate marketing. Transferred down to Rhode Island, at the time Fleet Bank. It's now, I think, part of Bank of America after about 15 different acquisitions since then. But worked corporate marketing, so learning that side of being more the client than the agent. And then took a little time off for my kids, but had a marketing consulting business. And one of my stints was spent at the Children's Museum.
That's where we met.
Where Mary Lou and I, not to brag or anything, but we held down the marketing fort while our director was on an extended medical leave.
Oh my goodness, I forgot about that. You are right.
Yes, yeah.
And many commutes back and forth. Janice was in Norfolk, I was in Needham.
Yep.
Her son Pierce babysat for my boys. We've just had such
a long time.
A wonderful relationship,
Yeah.
Janice.
And then got into the other side of the coin and picked up advertising sales.
Yeah.
And spent 7 years with the radio division of the Walt Disney Company.
I remember that.
So Radio Disney, for anybody that had little kids, a few years ago, might have tuned into AM 1260. And then from there into ad sales and sponsorships at a small education firm in Wrentham, Mass.
Yeah. Awesome. So Janice and I have always been connected. We had a couple years where, the kids were growing and in college that we weren't super connected, but we still kept in touch. And then all of a sudden, I hear that Janice wrote a book. And this is the first one, The Unlocked Path. And when I heard her story, I just couldn't put this book down. It is just so unique and so wonderful because I know the backstory. And Janice, being an empty nester, decided she was going to research her family tree, if I have it right. And she discovered that her great-grandfather?
Great.
Okay. Was one of the founders of the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
So share with our audience, because a lot of this show is really inspiring people to do their own thing as we all embrace next chapter. Some of us want to pick up pickleball, some of us want to travel. Janice went right to the family tree. So talk about what that journey was, what your first steps are, and how it evolved into really your second career, which is being an author. So go ahead.
So, facing graduation of the youngest son, both my boys played sports right through the college level. You know how much time that still takes up as a dedicated parent. So, had some more time on my hands and decided I was going to turn to some family history and research. Knew a lot about my mom's family, was fortunate to have my grandmother in my life for a long time. So knew their story of coming from Scotland and Nova Scotia, settling in Boston. Knew a lot about my dad's father. He was an incredibly accomplished man, a lawyer in Boston, worked for a congressman from Massachusetts in DC, was an artist, was a novelist. So knew a lot about him, but didn't know about my grandmother Robinson. And both of my father's parents had passed by the time I was born, so I never knew them. And one tip I'd like to always give folks is ask the questions. And I never asked the questions of my dad before he passed when I was only 29, so fairly still young and stupid. Turned to my older brothers who didn't have great memories of anything, period. So they weren't of much help. So I decided, okay, I'm going to look into this grandmother Robinson, who I don't know about, but there were mysteries. How did she grow up in Philadelphia and landed in Boston to meet my grandfather and get married at the ripe old age of 32? That was old maid in 1912. And then separated actually from my grandfather for almost 20 years, which was taboo to divorce back then. So I immediately just started with a good old Google search of her name, found her gravestone, which I already knew where that was in Newton, and didn't really find anything. She never went to college, she never worked outside her home, not involved in outside activities, so there was nothing of import to find about her. So Step back one more generation, knew the names of her parents, searched them, not much at all. Went back one more generation, now into her grandparents, which are my great-great, and that's where I hit the mother lode. And found William Shannon Pierce, who was quite an amazing man in the mid-1800s in Philadelphia. Found a lot of pieces about him, even found eulogies given at his funeral by some of his peers in law. He was a lawyer, and then he was a judge in Philadelphia. So that was pretty cool, but then stumbled on the last line in Famous Americans. There was an entry of him in Famous Americans that read he was a founder of the Women's Medical College in Pennsylvania.
And Janis, what did that mean to you when you found that out? Like, share that.
Well, you know, I knew that there were women's colleges in the 1800s, having gone to Wheaton, and Wheaton was still all women when I attended, and knew that Wheaton and many of the Seven Sisters were founded in the 1830s, 1840s, but never had heard that there were medical schools just for women. But I was immediately drawn by that idea that women were so compelled to want to study medicine and earn an accredited degree. And of course, all the medical schools denied them admission. You know, the Harvard and the Browns and the Yales and the Johns Hopkins. And that they were forthright thinking men in Philadelphia who decided to start a medical school for them. That just blew me away.
And what kind of pride did you feel?
Oh, incredible. Knowing that one of my ancestors believed in the rights of women to be educated.
Oh my goodness, yeah, and that comes through in your writing so
And that
beautifully.
idea of the rights of others, it made me incredibly proud. I had also learned he was involved in the abolitionist movement and helped runaway slaves gain their freedom when they were tried in the Philadelphia courts. So amazing pride, and that's when I started to think, at first, his story needed to be told.
Yeah.
And then I shifted and said, the more I got to know some of the women that I researched that had gone to the medical school and their accomplishments, just getting into the school, going through the same difficult course of study that any medical student goes through, and then coming out and achieving things that no one had heard about.
Yeah. So would you say that it was the pride that drove you to write the story?
That was the first step.
Okay.
But what really drove me was the amount of reading I do. I love to read, have always loved to read, and historical fiction's my favorite.
Yeah.
And it was sitting down and realizing I've never read anything about the real women doctors of history. And so that's when I decided they needed to be celebrated and honored and their stories brought out of the shadows.
Okay. So let's segue a bit here. So you go on this amazing research project. How long did that take you, by the way, just to give our audience some context of timing?
Research was mixed in from early on before I started writing, but then even while I was writing, I would have to pause and research something. So that whole time period of research and writing and editing was 3 years.
Okay, 3 years.
Yeah.
So what was the first step? So you decided, I'm going to write this story. So share with us what that process was like. Did you go out and buy a new desk, sharpen a couple of pencils, and get to work? Or I know you, I'm sure you did research on that as well. Did you join writers groups, or did you find a publisher? Like, walk us through, because you are a published author, and I know that that's not easy.
Yes.
So again, from A to Z,
Sure.
what did you do once you decided, I'm going to write this story?
Well, I had no background in creative writing. I mean, I had done well in my English classes at a liberal arts school, but not creative writing. And I had a lot of experience in business writing and strategic writing for business. So the very first thing I did was took a creative writing class.
I knew it.
online that would
Yeah.
fit my schedule. I was still working full-time as well at that point. So it was an online class offered through Coursera. But they had amazing professors and writing instructors from Yale and Wesleyan who would do the instructor videos, and then we'd have a prompt every week that we had to write against. So that was a fabulous start.
That was kind of a game changer.
Game
you started
changer.
to get your confidence
Yeah.
and say this could work.
Right, and then the capstone project was write your first chapter.
Okay, so you got
Yeah.
through that.
Got through
and
that.
then what was next?
And then just started to have a little bit of an idea of the outline, picking what time period I wanted to write about. I could have started the story when the school opened, when my ancestor was involved in 1850, but I decided to pick the time period that followed my grandmother's life. So I never learned anything about her, so I invented her story. And so the story runs from 1897, coming of age first, 18-year-old woman in Philadelphia, follows her then through up until 1920, and all the history of those early years that I was able to anchor with different events.
Yeah, you did a beautiful job. So you were working full time. How did you make the time to work to fit this all in?
Well, I wasn't going to lacrosse or football games. Yes, I had more time finally. And then I'm a night person. I say kudos. I don't know how people, I have a friend out in Oregon who gets up at 4 in the morning and writes before work. So yeah, not me.
Okay.
So evenings, I'd sit down and only do like maybe a page and a half at a time. I couldn't just write for hours. I didn't have the time and I didn't have the focus.
Okay.
But I wanted to fully immerse myself in that scene I was writing at that point in time.
Okay, so in terms of mindset, you gave yourself permission to not go all in because you had a full-time job, but you were able to pace it
Yes.
as a page at a time. Is that something that you picked up from other authors, or that was just something that you developed on your own because it worked?
It worked because after about 1,000 words, which is
Yeah.
about a page and a half, I just would shut down.
You would just shut down.
Yeah, and I just couldn't go any further.
Any moments of self-doubt?
Oh, plenty.
Every day.
Every day. Like, what am I doing? I'm not a writer. What the heck am I doing?
And what got you through that?
Support from family, for sure, first and foremost. Support and encouragement from friends. And then meeting other aspiring writers. I did join a couple of
That's right.
writers groups.
Yes, I knew that.
I
yeah.
went to a few conferences and meeting them, and those shared experiences.
Okay, so the research, being inspired, the sense of pride that really fueled your passion to get this story out, saying I've never written a book before, taking an online class, creative, I think that's huge, joining women's groups,
Yes.
attending women's writing groups, attending conferences. So you were kind of building the plane while you were flying it.
Yes, absolutely.
You were like, I'm going to get this done. This is my time limitations. These are my resources, but I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So fast forward, you now have 2 books. So share a little more about, because it's so cool that you got a publisher. And I know that was a second journey within the bigger journey. So share with our viewers a little bit more
Sure.
about that.
So, at first I had the dreams that every aspiring writer has, which is to get published with the big 5, the Simon & Schusters, the Penguin Random Houses. And that's a difficult task because you need an agent. And they won't talk to you if you don't have an agent. So finding an agent, incredibly difficult. And it didn't help that I was embarking on that task in the middle of a COVID shutdown. So a lot of people had, kind of checked out or told me they weren't taking on new clients. And I will be totally honest here that I think a debut author with no writing experience, not published even in literary magazines or anything, so my bio, who was going to take a chance on that? And a woman of a certain age. How many years?
A couple hurdles there.
How many years, how many
Yeah.
books
Yeah.
does this author have in her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're one of the most resilient people I know, really, truly, Janis. So, and I think that resiliency is something that a lot of people want to build that muscle. So can you share how you, with all that against you, and you've shared this story with me in the past, how did you still go forward? What was that voice in your head that said, I'm going to figure this out and I'm not going to be slowed down? Like, what were you saying to the naysayers? What were you saying to that voice in your head every time she creeped in and said, what the heck are you doing?
After countless rejections from agents and knowing I didn't want to come up with another list to try again and more time that would take, I started to think about possibly self-publishing, but I really wanted the validation that
Excellent.
somebody
I get
else
that. Totally get that.
thought my writing and my story was worthwhile.
Yeah.
So networking
Yeah.
is another
good old-fashioned
piece of that
networking.
puzzle.
Yes, it is.
So I had been simultaneously also as instructed and advised by many other authors, and agents would say, are you building a social platform? Because they look to authors to do their own marketing. So I was doing that, building my own social platform, and one way I was doing that and trying to build my name in historical fiction was doing reviews of other
Very smart.
books by other authors.
And that goes back to your marketing
Yeah.
background. So you're pulling it. I mean, I love these third chapter stories because you're able to pick and choose different parts of yourself from different parts of your life. And I find that women of a certain age just have so much more confidence, and you don't have the responsibilities that we all had 10 or 20 years ago. And I love that you just kept going, because to be a published author with a publisher is just fantastic. So I want to go into your other your speaking career that has definitely blossomed. But I just wanted to share with our viewers, I have a book club, and I've had Janis now twice, and these are serious bookworms. They both have just loved your books, and as did I. And my mom, who is a big historical fiction reader, I think she read both of them in about 2 days. She just loved them. So that's just huge. So a few more questions for you. What are you most proud of when you held this in your hand for the first time, or I guess, it was this one.
This one.
What did that feel like?
After I wiped away the tears.
Earned.
Yeah. It was incredible, because I never had any inkling in my life that this was going to be something that became part of defining me as it does now.
Okay, so I think part of your story is you've always been adventurous.
Yeah.
So you went on this adventure to find out more about your family tree, and you got inspired, you got that fire in the pit of your belly, you got the story just opened up right in front of you, an incredible story, and then you decided, I'm going to do this. So what would you say to folks out there that might want to research their own family history, write a book, embark on something that seems so big right now and out of reach? What would you say?
Well, first and foremost, ask the questions. I didn't ask the questions before my parents passed. So talk to the older members of your family. Learn from them, and they want to share.
Yeah. And then did you have like a journal or a notebook that you were capturing everything?
So for my research,
because I'm sure part of it was being
and
organized.
then using Ancestry.com was an incredible resource
So
to,
even the
to really
tools we
build
have
the
today,
tree. Absolutely.
the tools that we have available today are just incredible.
Right.
So the Pride, you get it published, you do a second book. Share a little bit more about what you spend a lot of time doing now, which is really educating people on history and research and genealogy. So share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I just kind of stumbled into this as well, learning that libraries are looking for great programming for their patrons. And I wanted to market my book, and I knew my readers were probably very active library patrons. Older women, but still had that yearning to learn.
Yes.
and
Is that
read.
marketing again, Janis?
And knowing your demographic, and historical fiction fits that
Yeah.
bill. So I started doing some talks at libraries about my books, but the primary part of the presentation wasn't just, this is my books, buy my books. It was where that inspiration came and the genealogy story. So that then morphed into being able to talk about genealogy research, being able to talk about women's history. And I have associations with the National Women's History Alliance. I put together a list every March for Women's History Month of books to read.
Yeah.
So I've really broadened that out and now have developed and engaged with speaking events up and down the East Coast, really. And
I
over
follow
Zoom.
you. I'm like,
I
Janis
know.
is never home. Janis is speaking everywhere. So how can our audience find you? What's a great way to find you and buy your book and follow you on social?
Sure. So first and foremost is my website, which has tons of information, and it's pretty easy. It's Janis, and that's Janis with an S, R, Daly, short version of Daly, D-A-L-Y, janisrdaly.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there. You can find my events. You can find information on my books, my book recommendations. Follow me on social, Facebook and Instagram. That's it. Don't be looking for me anywhere else.
No TikTok, Janis?
I can't handle any more than that.
Okay, and before we wrap up, can you just share, what does living well mean to you?
It's embracing every single day. And it's never stop wanting to learn, never stop being inquisitive, never stop giving up on the idea that you can pivot and adapt at any point in your life and find new adventures.
Awesome. Janis, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you,
are a
Mary
delight,
Lou.
and I'm so proud
Oh,
of you.
thank you.
Everyone, go out and buy these books. They are so inspirational. The Unlocked Path is the first one, and The Path Beneath Her Feet, and I loved both of them. So Janis, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you,
in
Mary
today.
Lou.
We'll be back again next month with another inspirational person to really inspire you to be your personal best.